Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, and regulatory landscape and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq Market Site is Glenn Kurban, partner of data and analytics at Capco, Cara Dailey, chief data officer of Rowe Price, and John Bottega, president of the EDM Council. We're here to discuss responsible, ethical, and transparent AI practices that are aligned with regulatory standards in the financial services space. It is great to have all of you with us. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And Glenn, give us a reminder of where Capco is within the data and analytics space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jill, for having me. Again, Glenn Kurban. I head up data and analytics for Capco here in the U.S. We're a global management consulting firm focused on the financial services markets. So we work with every large banking and insurance company that you might think of off the top of your head. And we're seeing a lot of interest in AI and Gen AI across the data spectrum right now.
Yeah, and we're familiar with Rowe Price as an asset manager, but when you think about it in the data realm, give us some insight into that.
Great, thank you, Jill. I am the Global Chief Data Officer for Rowe Price, and my responsibility is data governance, platforms, products, and architecture. Data is the fuel for AI, and so a lot of what my team is doing is making sure that the data is ready for use. And so we focus a lot on data quality and data management and data products. That's our role in all of this.
And John, data really is becoming the modern day commodity. Tell us about the work you're doing at EDM Council.
Sure, and again, also thank you, Jill, for having me. The EDM Council is a nonprofit trade association focused on data management, best practices in data management, and innovation. So a lot of what we do work with our members, and we have over 400, close to 400 members globally, all focusing, Rowe Price being one of them, and as well, driving best practice frameworks to enable what I call the boring side of technology, the data side of it, so that technologies like AI can excel and be successful and be done ethically.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you think about, I'm getting a call from compliance, their role is to make sure that the organization is compliant so we can do our jobs, and that's where governance fits in. But John, now that we've moved beyond the initial skepticism or what this kind of technology is as it relates to AI and Gen AI, how would you characterize the current state of awareness within the financial services space?
I think the skepticism certainly is gone. But I'd say we're probably in a hype stage still, meaning that there's such a desire to jump into this space that some of the basic foundational components, like data management, sometimes are either overlooked or not enough attention is put towards them. Meaning, like anything, garbage in, garbage out. If bad data is feeding into your AI models, you're not going to have a successful outcome of the objective of that model. And I've seen this. We work with members. Multiple discussions where they'll say, okay, we're going to restrict use of public LLMs. Okay, that's a responsible thing to do. And then I'll ask the question, well, what data are you using? Are you using your internal data? And they say yes. I say, is it correct and validated? And all the heads go down.
Yeah.
They haven't reached that point yet. So it's important to focus on that as a foundational component for being successful with AI.
Yeah, and when you think about it, Cara, from the perspective of you're in a very competitive landscape.
Yep.
You want to get products out there, whether it's internal, external facing, but you still want to make sure that the organization is aware of it and it's being done with risk management and compliance and governance as the forethought. Yeah.
So the way I think we're looking at it as we start small, we start safe, and then we start to take and scale from there. I think one of the best capabilities can really help the chief data officer. So when you think about AI and Gen AI, and you think about the reliance on data, think about using those capabilities to cleaning up your data. Get that data organized. We want to have good, healthy ingredients into our meals that we're making, right? And that's all about data governance. And I really think all of these great capabilities out there can accelerate the data strategy roadmaps that many of the CDOs have.
Right, because data begets more data and begets more product, right, Glenn? I would say a fair bit of skepticism perhaps is healthy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the past 12 to 18 months, we've seen skepticism move to, I guess, a bit of professional, let's make sure we're adhering to all risks and controls around this technology. There's certainly an appetite out there. We've seen with our clients a number of buyers internally who want to put this technology into practice. But what they typically run aground with is your risk and your audit functions within the organization that throw a flag. And in many cases, I think this is because those groups don't yet understand exactly what they're dealing with, and they don't have a control framework that can be explained. This whole idea of explainability has not really matured into what we want it to be at this point.
Yeah, and part of, I'm sorry, Ken.
I was going to say, Glenn, I don't know if you've seen this, but I've heard from a number of members where their data management budgets were cut and the money was applied to AI.
That's
And
right.
It seems almost crazy to do that.
Right.
Isn't it?
We've spoken about this before,
That's right.
haven't we? On a former panel where I can't stress the importance when it comes to data and cyber spend. If that risk function is not a forefront, the rest of the business can't function. And if you think about it, these tools, AI, good actors, bad actors are using it, but if you employ it in the risk and compliance and cyber functions, better predictable for vulnerabilities, mitigation, and then you have that built-in response to it as well.
The example, Jill, that I use often, for us who've been around long enough, we remember the age of desktop analytics and self-service. Before that, enterprise reports and what have you. All these data consumption patterns, AI is yet another sort of evolution or revolution in some cases of the same. You're still consuming the same organizational data, in some cases external data, but guess what? Until you convince those risk parties within the organization that this is safe, it's based on data that we can trust, and we're going to actually make decisions off of it, you're going to be stymied with your progress.
Right, and Cara, part of it is it's creating internal efficiencies when it comes to customer experience, product offerings, reporting, which is a key component when you think about governance. The cat's out of the bag, right? And it's not going back. I mean, even something as basic as Excel sheets and modeling and so forth, it's changed the game.
It's totally changed the game, and I think it's time to really focus on organizing your data closets. So I talk about this a lot internally, is that we've ignored our closets for years, and it's now time to make sure that everything is in its right place, it's categorized, it's tagged, and so when you think about the capabilities that AI needs, it needs organized, well-cleaned data. And so that's why I think the marriage of the data strategy to the AI capabilities is such a great synergy, because while we do need to have a risk and controls framework that is super important, you need to have AI let access to the good, clean data that you do have.
Right, and you have to be proactive about it, John, because in the absence of modern regulatory framework, whether you're looking at data, AI, cyber, it's all happening now. It's all evolving. To take this on yourself and provide those internal guardrails and policy, I feel is you need that more than ever now.
True, but the funny thing is, this is really nothing new.
Right.
We go back to the financial crisis. The two components that, from an information perspective, not from a policy, that's all aside, was your data and your models, right? So if you translate that into today, it's your data and your models again. Okay, it's an AI model. It's more accelerated in its capability, but we had the same issue. And the legislation or the directive that came out of the Basel Committee, known as BCBS 239, basically said to the financial industry, get your data right and get your models right. So if you think about it, we've been talking about this for almost 20 years, right?
Yes.
Except now it's AI instead of pure analytic models, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And that gap in the data side, like you said, the data governance side is so important.
Yeah.
We're just in a different realm of technology.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, because John and I have been through the history of the financial services crisis and data and models. And honestly, the governance framework hasn't changed at all. Right. It's all about the technology and the innovation, and we can get there faster if we're willing to adopt it. But data governance, categorizing your data, having owners around your data, making sure it's good quality, that hasn't changed at all.
And Glenn, I think these are great points that both John and Cara are making, and I remember this going through the financial crisis, and even more recently when we saw some of the failures of the banks that had exposure to digital assets, or were the lenders within the space. And the question was, how could they not model out like the worst case scenario? And that's not that far out. Perhaps technology like this, it might have looked a little bit different when it came to the modeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So this idea of, almost the cyber concept of war games and tabletop exercises, I think we need to adopt some of those types of concepts as we think about AI and Gen AI. How do I put into a real life scenario the types of things that I'm trying to do with this tech, and actually, play that all the way out to find out if I will have damaging business impacts, should something go awry.
Yeah, and it's applicable more than to just financial services, by the way. In your notes here, anytime you're trying to establish a risk model, whether it doesn't matter what industry it's in, you want to be able to predict it, mitigate it, respond to it, learn from that going forward, and it just advances what you learn.
Absolutely. I mean, AI eats data for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so it's a fundamental dependency. So whether you're in banking, you're in financial services, wealth, I worked for Nike, same thing, right? It's retail has a thirst for that as well, and the capabilities are there.
So, John, when you're thinking about new frameworks and techniques to implement, data governance with organizations, what are some of the strategies you recommend when it comes to combating emerging risks and dangers that are associated with these newer technologies we're trying to figure out in real time?
Well, if we look at that through the lens of data, the EDM Council, as a trade association, has developed frameworks, in one particular, the Data Capability Assessment Model, which, Cara, you're familiar with. Both public and private sector now are leveraging it, and it's not rocket science. It's basic components of capability you need to have an effective data management program. So as you naming those capabilities, data governance, data architecture, data quality, these things that have to be implemented and operational are critical to that factor of input that goes into the AI model. So then again, that's not new either, right? Leverage these best practices, leverage these models. The council works with another trade association called DAMA, and they have the DAMA Book of Knowledge. So between the DAMA Book of Knowledge and the DCAM, the Data Capability Assessment Model, these are two great tools that companies can use, and like you said, across all industry. Because the risks you face are not only financial, they're also reputational. You get into the ethics side of things. If the data is not governed properly, right? Or you're pulling from sources that aren't authorized, you could put the company's reputation at risk as well. So leverage these frameworks that exist.
Just to jump in on that point, and I think you're hearing a theme here. As we think about AI and data as the lifeblood of it, everything that we hear is hearkening back to what we started data governance for 20, 25 years ago, right? Thematically, the governance engine is there, the plumbing is there. So when clients often come and ask, do we stand up a whole new group around AI governance, or do we lever what's there potentially? My answer is unequivocally, use the framework that's already there, because it may be slightly different in places, but you have a pretty holistic governance concept there.
And what we learned though, think about 20 years ago, the idea was create this big monster department within your organization. And now we've learned, thin it down, and it takes a village. Everybody in an organization touches data.
Right, it shouldn't be so siloed.
That's
I think that's always been the challenge.
Very good point. The best rollouts I've seen of data governance is a federated model, meaning the business teams are owning the data because they are creating it via their processes, so you know where it gets created. And the technology teams, they're pulling it together centrally. Maybe we're hosting it on a platform, we can feed it into AI, whatever it might be, but that federated model of really driving data ownership with the business teams, that's really, really critical.
And when you think about the usage of AI right now, there's nothing more federated, right? It's in the hands of end users, and in some cases in dark corners that you don't know that's going on in your organization.
Cara and I were joking before when we both started down this path of the CDO. The goal was, let's implement an operating model so that we put ourselves out of work.
We're still here.
we never quite achieved that, right? But that's really still the goal. You want to bring all hands on deck, so to speak, because data is an asset across the entire firm. Everybody has a part in it. And the role of the CDO has become more of a leadership role, right? And create that vision and that best practice for everybody to embrace.
Glenn, I want to go back to this and kind of take the other side for a moment. What about upskilling? What about data education literacy for the business and data professionals? Every function across the organization, look at how even Marcoms as an example, how they're using data in just the past 5 to 10 years. The function's completely different.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking for direction. So can I actually take advantage of these tools that are available to me? I think early days, when a year, 18 months ago, we were talking about policies that govern AI. I think you need to double down on those positions, make sure that that is going out in the same way as your compliance training around anything else that you need to educate your organization on. But I do go back to the point that if we want to make progress, if organizations want to move the needle on Gen AI and AI usage, you need to make sure your risk folks are very comfortable. Until we get to that point, we have a good control framework that they can then add to audit and all these other places. We're going to continue to get caught up in a cycle where we're not really moving forward.
And that's the concern about rushing to market in a very competitive landscape.
Right. And it's a culture shift. It's a culture shift around how do I understand and know my data that I own, and where is that being used down the line? It's all about making sure that you ever played the telephone game when you were a kid,
Yes, yep.
right? And so the message starts with one thing and ends with a drastically another. That can happen if you don't have that automation in between. So it's really, really important to make sure you know where your data comes from, who owns that data, and then once you get all of that really straight, those AI capabilities setting on top is going to be so scalable.
Right. And it goes back to the point that you made off the top here, John, about the intangible value of reputation, right? And then, you know, and if an incident evolves, then it becomes a whole other game. You can't place a value on that.
Well, Glenn, you hit a really good point about audit. You know, one of the things that I will always tell people is in the data space is hire an auditor within your data program, someone who has that audit experience, right? Because they are thinking that way. How do I protect the firm? How do I protect individual privacy? How do I protect ethics? Right? That's an important aspect that needs to be part of that central strategy of your data program. And that's a way to avoid these things.
Right. Especially, Glenn, when you think about it, what's considered responsible and ethical use, it's a very arbitrary question as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think we've seen enough use cases or case studies on unethical use at this point, right? So there is this lingering fear that somebody's going to do something bad and it's going to create reputational risk for the organization and individuals as well. Those stories haven't played out yet. So, you know, we're still thinking through the tapestry of risk, you know, around this. And I think this year we'll start seeing, you know, probably some good and bad stories.
Well, there have been some headline
that's
examples of
Right. But in a way, Cara, every 5 to 10 to 15 years, there is going to be some sort of headline story. I mean, we've seen this happen with cash, stocks, bonds. Do we stop trading stocks because of Madoff, right? But you learn from these. Where can we create redundancies? Where can we mitigate downtime? So you learn from these events, and they're not going to be the first or the last.
No, they won't. And I think it's about learning from the events that happen and putting in mitigating controls. You know, throughout my career, I've focused on putting really strong data controls in place so that we mitigate our risk in terms of the data that we use, the data where it came from, et cetera. And I think that's really the foundation for these AI capabilities, is to really sit on a foundation of really good controlled data environments.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, it's almost, and I think we brought this up last time you were here, it's a game of 4D chess, right? Because bad actors, good actors are employing the same type of technology, so it really is.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and I mentioned this to you earlier. I mean, I'm involved with a graduate IT audit class right now. The materials that we're using, they have no mention of any of this. So, I mean, we are creating the structure as we go here day to day. And this new generation of risk and audit folks that might be coming out of programs, they're not really getting this, you know, this education in real time.
Which is interesting, because I finished my grad work in the spring of 2023. Gen AI, or ChatGPT, became part of the vernacular in November 2022. It wasn't even in my syllabus.
That's right.
For our last semester, right? And now I'm in law school, and it is ubiquitous. It is used in LexisNexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg Law. So it's a tool that you're almost expected to know how to use, John.
Jill, I think you're hitting a good point. We've now talked about all of the risks. Let's look at the opportunities.
Yes.
Right.
And the opportunities in front of us, I've been doing this since the 1990s. And I was an early chief data officer. I was one of the first chief data officers in 2006. The way we would handle data quality of those was painful spreadsheet, manual effort, and so forth. The technology that exists today is so powerful that the amount of work that we can get done, and plus results, the amount of data has increased dramatically, right? So you can't do it manually anymore. It's just impossible. Leverage these tools with a governance perspective of it, right? But to improve your data quality, to identify lineage, you know, we talk about lineage of the source of data, to identify privacy components within your data, your PII data, where it exists. The tools are out there. We have to really start to leverage them. and to take advantage, like you said in your experience, all these tools now are here for us, right? And I don't think we're leveraging them enough.
And we'll leave it on a positive note. Thank you for everyone's insight, and thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.